very exciting to have Troy
Okay.
Aikman day after the Super Bowl. So the game is, where did Troy Aikman watch the Super Bowl yesterday? And we have no knowledge. I'd like to go first.
Okay.
I bet Troy hosted a small get-together, but maybe like a local restaurant, rent out a room. He doesn't want a bunch of riffraff messing up his nice house.
But do you have to have a football, like a Wonderlic test before you get into Troy's party so he doesn't have to answer stupid questions?
That's a great idea.
Okay.
I'm going to go local restaurant he hosted.
Okay. Fritzy.
I think somewhere in Dallas. So
Dallas.
maybe a big sports bar or something.
No, that wouldn't happen. Yes, Seton.
I think Troy went to the game.
Okay.
I think he was there.
I don't think he went. Marv.
Alone in his house.
Alone in his house.
Okay.
I'm going to say with family at maybe in Cabo. How about that? Maybe he was with Joe Buck in Cabo. Let's bring in Troy Aikman, who's playing the Troy Aikman game. Troy, where did you watch the game?
I watched it in Santa Barbara. I've got a place here. Watched it with some friends. So I typically, a little bit of some accuracy on all your all's parts. I usually have a party back at my place in Dallas, invite a bunch of people over, but I did not do that this year. But I got a chance to actually sit and watch the game, so it was good.
But do people bother you when you host a party?
No. If I thought they would, I wouldn't invite them to the party.
Okay. Do you like that idea of a Wonderlic test to get into a Troy Aikman party?
Yeah, I hadn't heard it put quite like that, but I do like that, Dan. That's good. It's genius on your part. That's going to start happening next year.
I like that. Joining us on behalf of 8 Elite Light Beer, and a lot's happened with this lager that you brought to the marketplace, certainly in the state of Texas.
Yeah, we've just had our 1-year anniversary. So, you were a part of it, of course, when I came on the show last year at the Super Bowl and talked about it and hoping that it would be received the way that we hoped that it might. And it has been. So we've surpassed all of our expectations. It's been very well received. Obviously, as you know, it's a light lager, 90 calories, 2.6 carbs for people that are active. And now we're looking at moving it into other markets. And we're excited about that. So year 2, as is always the case, we're not the new kid on the block anymore, and we've got a lot of work left ahead of us.
Somebody sent me a 6-pack of your beer a couple of weeks ago. Do you know?
I'm hoping you don't still have 5 left, Dan.
No, but there was a 6-pack on my doorstep here at the Man Cave.
Good.
But I don't know who sent it.
Well, we sent it.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
You're welcome.
Well, we polished it off that day.
Yeah, good.
Oh,
good,
yeah.
Good.
I was like, you left kittens on a doorstep, and I'm like, oh, I got send a 12-pack next time, okay? What were you thinking at halftime last night?
Well, I mean, I don't. Depends on how you're looking at it, from whose perspective. What I thought was that a lot of really good things had happened for Philadelphia, and I also knew, as was the conversation throughout the last couple of weeks, that with Patrick Mahomes, there's not a lead that's really, that insurmountable. We had them when they played against the 49ers. We called that game. Joe and I did, so we certainly understand it. The looking at the game, Dan, the thing that I was most impressed with, sitting there watching it, was just how good Kansas City's offensive line was. I just didn't feel like at any point. Now, there was some times, Mahomes had to move around, but that's every week, every quarterback. But I thought for a vaunted pass rush like Philadelphia had, to not come away with a sack and really not impact that game, I thought that was the real key in the Chiefs being able to win the game.
There were a couple of moments. We'll get to the holding penalty, but there were a couple of moments where I thought the Eagles' defense was really confused by a couple of different sets that the Chiefs had.
Yeah.
Now, had they shown any of those sets previous to this game, in your opinion?
You're talking about in the red zone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think that. I didn't think what they did on those plays, Dan. They weren't that challenging. I mean, those are staple plays down in the red zone where you start a guy like you're gonna jet sweep him across, or he's gonna drag across the field. He comes out of it. They're good calls. They're expected man coverage. That's what they get. and the Eagles didn't play it very well, and a lot of that is simply that's where the speed of the Chiefs comes in, because those guys are so fast that in order to be able to keep up with them down there when you're trying to run with them across the field, you kind of got to get a head start on them. So that's why they get out ahead. Well, then they pivot and they come back out of it twice and for easy touchdowns. So the other part of that, of course, was the red zone efficiency of Kansas City. I mean, they came away with touchdowns once they got down there.
Mahomes in the second half, what was he seeing that made it so much simpler than the first half?
Well, I think what happens, especially in a big game, it happens every week, but especially when you get into a game like the Super Bowl, and granted, even though Mahomes has played in prior Super Bowls, it's still a little bit of a different animal. So I think that when you start the game, things are going pretty fast. You don't always see things as clearly. And then as the game goes along, it slows down and it becomes much like any other game at that point. And I felt that in the second half, not that he struggled that much in the first half. I thought he was pretty good throughout, but I just felt that he was seeing the field really well, was getting time to throw, more importantly. And then the other part of it as well is I thought, my thoughts on Kansas City going into the game was you knew what Philadelphia wanted to do, and they wanted to run the ball. You know what Kansas City likes to do, and they like to throw the ball. And why wouldn't they when Mahomes is their quarterback? But I've seen them when they've run the ball, and they've been highly successful. And I was wondering if Andy Reid would be willing to stick with that. And he was. I felt they had to be balanced to take the pressure off this offensive line. And I thought it was just a textbook offensive game plan and the way that he called it throughout that game last night.
Talking to Troy Aikman, Jalen Hurts, aside from the fumble, those are some big-time plays in the biggest game of your life. What did you think?
Big-time plays. Dallas Goedert made some amazing catches in that game. I thought, Philadelphia has nothing to be ashamed of. That's the disappointing thing when you get into the Super Bowl and you lose. But I will say this, and I'd said it during the week on another show that I was on, and I think it's really true. Jimmy Johnson would always say to us before these games, it's not who makes the most big plays, it's who makes the fewest bad plays when you're talking about big games. And when you look at this game, and I really felt that would be the story. Everybody talks about the plays this guy can make or that guy can make. And so many times it's who makes the fewest bad plays. And that bad play by Jalen Hurts obviously ended up being the difference in the score.
Yeah, because I thought it felt like they should have been up more than 10.
I agree. I agree. They had dominated the first half in a lot of ways. And didn't fully take advantage of that. And when you're playing against good teams, especially good teams quarterbacked by one of the real greats, those things come back to haunt you.
All right, let's get to the holding call that was called on James Bradberry. We've had athletes who've joined us, current, former, and you guys just want a consistent game called. Like right. what's going to be called and what's not going to be called. And then that one kind of came out of nowhere. There were no holding calls in that game. And then all of a sudden we have that. You have any problem with that call?
Well, it was interesting because when Fox replayed it and then Mike Pereira got on, initially when they replayed it, I didn't think they went to the start of really kind of where the hold that was called took place.
Yep.
So I agreed with Mike saying, hey, if you go back and you show it sooner in the route, and then they showed it, and I didn't see what I thought I saw initially. Now, I will say I don't think there was a great look at it. I think there was one angle. I didn't see a good look at a real hold for that moment in the game. So I personally didn't like the call. I don't know, though, Dan, if you say, hey, you can't make that call at that point in the game. I don't know that I agree with that premise, because I think holding is holding, and that's what the official's job is. You have to be willing to make a call if, in fact, it happened. But from what I could tell and what I saw, I didn't think there was enough there to basically to basically hand the Super Bowl over to Kansas City. The game was over at that point. I didn't feel like there was, to me, it had to be pretty egregious to where there was just no doubt. And I think the fact that we're sitting here having this conversation, and I'm sure people are all across the country, probably tells you there wasn't quite enough there.
Yeah, Dean Blandino, Fox's rules analyst, going to join us here coming up in a little bit. Also, the longer halftime show, it seemed like that would have benefited Mahomes, who had the tender ankle, and that must feel interminable when you're just sitting there. And did you get to hear the music at all? Did you care who the halftime show was in your Super Bowls?
Couldn't care less. And I probably, my first Super Bowl was probably the best halftime show in the history of Super Bowls, and that was Michael Jackson. And all I wanted to do was win a Super Bowl, Dan. I know what that meant. I know what that meant to a quarterback. Now, Michael Irvin, on the other hand, he says that he went out and snuck out there to where he could watch the halftime show, and I don't remember that, but I'm not at all surprised by that. That would be expected.
If you had input on the Cowboys in the offseason, let's say one or two things that you said to Jerry Jones, you got to do this, or stand pat, whatever it is, what would you say?
Yeah, I think they've got to. I don't think they addressed the wide receiver position when Amari Cooper left. I've always said, Dan, back when I was playing, that your offense is only as good as your third receiver. And now I would say that might very well be you're only as good as your fourth receiver. And it doesn't have to be a wide receiver. It could be a tight end, but you got to have four pretty solid weapons in today's game if you're going to be the offense that you really need to be to move the football. And so they lose Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup was coming off a major knee injury. He wasn't the same guy that we had seen from him. The workload really came down to CeeDee Lamb. So I believe that they will. They tried to when they brought in T.Y. Hilton. There was talk about Odell Beckham. They recognized, I think, throughout the year where they were limited. And now I think the running back, they're going to have to make some hard decisions in addition to that, to players that have been impactful for them, and do they keep them? Guys, for instance, like Zeke Elliott, what's going to happen with him?
Wright Thompson did a wonderful profile on Joe Montana during Super Bowl week. And Joe was forever the greatest quarterback of all time. And then Tom Brady blew by him. And Wright Thompson pointed out that Joe kind of struggling with that. Like, you lose your identity as the greatest quarterback of all time. As we see, the game get farther and farther away from guys like you who have played, like, do you ever worry about your place? You're a Hall of Famer, but do you ever worry about, like, where you are in history?
Well, I would say this, Dan, that I've got that article. I haven't yet read it. I've heard it's fantastic. So I'm excited, really excited about reading it. I also, Joe Montana was in the league when I came into the league. I watched him when I was in high school and college. I've always felt for the longest time that he was the greatest to have ever done it. And then you lose sight of guys like Otto Graham and those type players that we just didn't get a chance to see. And then I called the game when Tom Brady won his 5th Super Bowl. And I said at that time, I don't think we can dispute it now. This is the greatest that's ever done it. And then he's gone on, of course, and then really solidified that opinion. Am I worried? Dan, no one's ever thought I was the greatest. So this is real easy for me. This is, it's never been that important to me on where I've placed in the list of great quarterbacks. I'm proud of my career. I went into the Hall of Fame. I joined the Cowboys. I was drafted by the Cowboys to win Super Bowls. I was able to win 3 of them. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. I mean, in my opinion, that's all that matters, because that's why we play, and that's why we were drafted, and that's why we get paid, is to go win championships. And I was able to win 3 of them. And that stacks up pretty good in the history of quarterbacks. But beyond that, if somebody says, "Hey, you don't deserve this," or you weren't, I don't really care. I'm broadcasting. I'm broadcasting games. I'm not the guy who really wants to sit back and talk about 25 years ago. It's just never been really my thing. And people say, "Really? Well, why is that?" And I said, "Well, it'd almost be like if every person who's listening to this, if they were told, hey, let's go back and talk about your junior high days and what those meant to you." And you say, "Man, they were fun times, but I've kind of moved on from then." And so that's where I'm at. I don't pay a lot of attention to all that. I admire the great quarterbacks and the people that are doing it. Where I'm at and all of that is really pretty irrelevant.
You got one quarterback to win one game, and you can't pick you.
I would. Well, it's a great question. I would say I would either take Joe Montana. I'd probably take Joe Montana. I think Tom Brady would be a close second, but I saw Joe do things. Of course, we've all seen Tom do it as well. One of those two guys, I'd probably go with Joe.
It's great to talk to you again, and good luck with the beer. It's called 8 Elite Light Lager, and it's Troy Aikman, done an incredible job the first year and starting to branch out, building the fastest independent beer ever launched in the state of Texas. Troy, great to talk to you. Have a great off season.
Thank you, Dan. Always a pleasure.
That's T. Roy Aikman